Welcome back to Random History, the podcast where we dig up the bizarre, the forgotten, and the downright weird stuff from the dusty archives of the past. I'm the navigator as we explore the little-known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. These are not the topics you would have heard about in school. In fact, if you did hear about them, you're likely to think that they could not possibly be real. But they are. Today we're diving into one of the most incredible stories of human ingenuity, the life and exploits of the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville. I have admired these men pretty much my whole life. From a young age, I read every book I could find on them. Then, a few years ago, a friend of mine, in fact, he was the best man in my wedding, gave me David McCulloch's book, which reignited my fascination with the lives of these two brothers. Like me, they're from Dayton, Ohio, where they owned a bicycle shop. They didn't just tinker with bicycles. They cracked the code to powered flight and changed the world forever. Today, I'm going to focus on their bike shop roots and their aviation breakthroughs, with a few little detours along the way. So buckle up, or maybe strap in, and let's get started. First, let's travel back in time. It's the late 19th century and the world is buzzing with new tech. Bicycles are the hot new thing. Electricity is lighting up cities and people are starting to dream big, like flying big. Enter Wilbur and Orville Wright, born in 1867 and 1871 respectively, to a preacher dad, Milton, and a mechanically savvy mom, Susan. These brothers grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a house full of books and curiosity. Neither went to college, but they were tinkerers from the start. As kids, they built kites, fixed toys, even made a wood lathe together. Their dad once brought home a toy helicopter, and that little rubber band-powered trinket sparked something in them. Now, before they were aviation legends, the Wrights were entrepreneurs. In 1889, Orville, still in high school, started a printing business. Wilbur joined in, and they churned out newspapers like the West Side News. In fact, one of their frequent contributors was a classmate of Orville's, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who would make history of his own by becoming an inspiration for the Harlem Renaissance as a poet. But by 1892, they caught the bicycle craze sweeping America. Bikes weren't just toys. In the time before the automobile had really caught on, they were freedom machines. You've undoubtedly seen pictures of some of the early bikes, huge front wheel, tiny rear wheel. They were, by all accounts, very difficult to control. For the Wrights, the safety bicycle, with two equal-sized wheels, was a game changer. The brothers opened the Wright Cycle Exchange, fixing and selling bikes. By 1896, they were building their own brand, the Van Cleve, priced at a cool $65. It was a premium ride. Here's why the bike shop matters. It wasn't just a side hustle. It was their engineering lab. Working with bikes taught them balance, mechanics, and precision. They honed their school in wood and metalwork, which would later translate to wings and propellers. Plus, the shop's profits, about $5,000 over the years, funded their flight experiments. No investors, no Kickstarter, just bike money. And get this, the bike shop was where they built their first gliders and even a wind tunnel in 1901 to test their wing designs. That's right, these guys were running a full-on R&D operation behind the bike counter. So, what flipped the switch from bikes to flight? To be honest, the Wright brothers had always been interested in flying, even before that little toy helicopter their dad had brought home. They read everything they could find on the subject. One of their inspirations was a German flying pioneer named Otto Lilienthal. In 1896, news of Lilienthal's death in a glider crash reached Dayton, and the news hit the Wright brothers hard. They started reading even more on aeronautics, hitting up the Smithsonian for books and papers. Wilbur wrote to them in 1899 saying, "I am afflicted with the belief that flight is possible to man." That's the moment they went all in. They figured the key wasn't just getting off the ground, but controlling the machine in the air, something others, like Lilienthal, had overlooked. The brothers' big aha moment came from all things a bike inner tube box. One night in 1899, Wilbur was twisting a cardboard box and realized that, warping the wings, like a bird's, they could control roll. They called it wing warping, and it was the secret sauce for stable flight. They tested this first on kites, then on gliders, camping out in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina for its windy sand dunes and soft landings. Kitty Hawk was their proving ground, but it was rough. Mosquitoes, storms, and locals who thought they were a bit insane. But by 1902, their glider was nailing controlled flights, thanks to the data from their homemade wind tunnel. But gliders only glide. They wanted powered flight. So they teamed up with Charlie Taylor, their bike shop mechanic, to build a lightweight engine. No one had used aluminum in an aircraft before, but Charlie crafted a 12-horsepower beast connected to propellers with, you guessed it, bicycle chains. The result was the 1903 Wright Flyer, a spruce and fabric contraption they built for $1,000, all from their bike shop savings. 17 December 1903 was the day. It was freezing, windy, but the Flyer was ready. After a coin toss, Orville took the controls, and at 10:35 a.m., he flew 120 feet in 12 seconds. Bumpy, but historic. Wilbur took the fourth and final flight that day, soaring 852 feet in 59 seconds. A local man, John T. Daniels, snapped the iconic photo of that first flight, calling it the prettiest sight he ever saw. 4 flights, 5 witnesses, and the aviation age was born. After Kitty Hawk, the Wrights did not rest. They refined their designs back in Dayton, flying the 1905 Wright Flyer III, the first truly practical airplane. They became global celebrities, dazzling crowds in Europe with public flights in 1908. Their sister Catherine, or Kate, was their biggest cheerleader, managing PR and keeping the family tight. But success wasn't all smooth. On 17 September 1908, tragedy struck. Orville was flying a demonstration flight for the Army with Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge as a passenger. In the middle of a turn, one of the propellers snapped, and a large piece of it severed a control cable. Orville was unable to recover the plane, and it crashed from an altitude of 75 feet. Selfridge was killed, making him the first airplane fatality, and Orville was severely injured. The accident kept the Army from purchasing the Wright Flyer for about a year. They also were fighting patent wars, suing competitors like Glenn Curtiss for copying their wing warping system. Some historians, like Edward Roach, say their focus on lawsuits held back their business as aviation exploded. Tragedy struck again in 1912 when Wilbur died of typhoid fever at the age of 45. Orville carried on, defending their legacy until his death in 1948. He even clashed with the Smithsonian, who briefly credited Samuel Langley's machine as, quote, capable of flight before the Flyer. Orville wasn't having it and sent the Flyer to London in protest until the Smithsonian relented in 1948. Let's take a look at the bigger picture, though. The Wrights weren't just inventors. They were proof that grit, tenacity, and imagination could solve impossible problems. Their bike shop wasn't glamorous, but it was where they learned to fail, tweak, and try again. They didn't have degrees or big budgets, just a belief in their own brains and a knack for mechanics. As David McCullough puts it, they changed the face of the globe. And as a side note, Neil Armstrong carried a piece of the Wright Flyer's fabric to the moon in 1969, linking their 12-second hop to humanity's giant leap. Their story reminds us that big dreams start small, sometimes in a dusty bike shop. So next time you're fixing a flat tire or staring at the sky, Think of Wilbur and Orville Wright peddling their way to history. For today's hero segment, I want to talk about a man that truly defined bravery. I was introduced to this hero by my eldest son when he suggested that I read Horned Fisher's book, The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. Without further ado, today's hero is Commander Ernest Edwin Evans. Commander Ernest Evans was the fearless captain of the USS Johnston during the Battle off Samar in World War II. This man faced impossible odds, led his crew with unmatched bravery, and became a symbol of valor in one of the U.S. Navy's finest hours. Buckle up as we explore the story of the Chief and the last stand of the Tin Can Sailors. Let's lay the background. It's 25 October 1944 off the coast of Samar in the Philippines. There's a small American task unit up against a Japanese armada that seemed unbeatable. Ernest Evans was born in Pawnee, Oklahoma in 1908, a man of Cherokee and Creek heritage who overcame prejudice to rise through the ranks of the U.S. Navy. Nicknamed the Chief by his Naval Academy classmates, Evans was a natural leader. Proud of his Native American roots, he enlisted in 1926, earned a spot at the Naval Academy, and graduated in 1931, a remarkable feat given the era's challenges for Native Americans. Evans served on several ships, including the destroyer USS Alden during the attack on Pearl Harbor. By October 1943, he took command of the USS Johnson, a Fletcher-class destroyer. At its commissioning ceremony, he set the tone. Quote, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Those words weren't just bravado. They were a promise that Evans would keep. Evans' resolve would truly be tested at the Battle off Samar, part of the larger Battle of Leyte Gulf, where his small destroyer faced a Japanese fleet of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. On the morning of 25 October 1944, Task Unit 77.43, nicknamed Taffy 3, was escorting 6 escort carriers supporting Douglas MacArthur's invasion off the Philippines. Taffy 3 included the USS Johnston, destroyers Hull, Heermann, and 4 destroyer escorts, along with those lightly armed carriers. The larger force, led by Admiral Halsey, had abandoned the landing of Leyte to chase after what was left of Japanese aircraft carriers. Suddenly, they spotted a Japanese force, 4 battleships, including the massive Yamato, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers, a fleet that dwarfed Taffy 3 in firepower and armor. The Yamato alone outweighed all of Taffy 3's ships combined. The American destroyers, called tin cans because of their thin armor, had 5-inch guns and torpedoes. No match for the Japanese 18-inch guns. Retreat seemed logical, but Evans had other plans. Without waiting for orders, he swung Johnson toward the enemy, broadcasting all hands to general quarters, prepare to attack a major portion of the Japanese fleet. Evans charged at a Japanese cruiser, zigzagging through shell fire to launch a torpedo salvo at 10,000 yards, blowing the bow off the cruiser Kumano. The Johnston laid smoke screens to shield the carriers and kept firing, confusing the Japanese into thinking they faced a larger force. Over the next 3 hours, Evans and his crew fought relentlessly, even as the Johnson took devastating fire from the 6 and 14-inch shells of the Japanese. Wounded early in the battle, Evans shifted command to the ship's fantail, shouting orders through a hatch as the bridge had been destroyed. The Johnston's actions alongside other Taffy 3 ships and aircraft from Taffy 2 disrupted the Japanese advance and saved the invasion force from sure annihilation. The Japanese commander, Vice Admiral Kurita, mistook the ferocity for a larger fleet and retreated, sparing MacArthur's invasion force. But the cost was high. The Johnston sank at 10:11, with less than half of its 327-man crew surviving. Evans was last seen giving the order to abandon ship, his fate uncertain. Some say he was hit by shellfire. others that he tried escaping on a life raft. The Battle of Samar was truly a David versus Goliath victory, and Evans' leadership earned him the Medal of Honor. Let's reflect on his legacy. Commander Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in protecting Taffy 3's carriers. He became the first Native American in the Navy to receive this honor, one of only 2 World War II destroyer captains to do so. The citation praises his indomitable courage and brilliant professional skill in turning back the enemy. The Battle of Samar, dubbed the last stand of the tin can sailors by historian James Hornsfisher, is celebrated as the Navy's finest hour. Evans' crew and Taffy 3's sailors showed that courage could overcome overwhelming odds. In 2024, the Navy announced a new Arleigh Burke-class destroyer named the USS Ernest E. Evans, a fitting tribute to his sacrifice. Evans' story resonates beyond the battlefield. His rise from a tough upbringing to naval hero inspires us to face our challenges head-on, just as he charged into harm's way. As one survivor put it, the Johnston was a fighting ship, and he was the heart and soul of her. So that's our hero for today, the story of Commander Ernest Evans, a true hero who led with courage and gave everything to protect his country. If you want to dive deeper, check out James Hornsfisher's book, The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, or Destroyer Captain. If you haven't noticed, this episode's a little bit longer than my normal episodes. Like I said at the opening, I've admired the Wright brothers since I was a kid, so I've devoted a little more time to them. Their accomplishments helped shape many of the decisions I've made in my life. If you want to learn more about them, the Wright brothers' original bike shop was relocated to Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. Its original location was on 3rd Street in Dayton, Ohio. One of their B Flyers, the first purchased by the military, is in Carillon Park in Dayton. After their initial flights, they moved their testing to an area outside of Dayton called Huffman Prairie. Now it's designated a National Historic Landmark. Another early Wright Flyer is on display as the National Museum of the Air Force. So if you're ever in the Dayton area, please take the time to visit these national treasures, along with the Paul Laurence Dunbar House. The contributions of people like the Wright brothers, along with men like Commander Evans, helped make America truly great. They opened the sky to mankind and defended us from tyranny. The technological explosion that began with the 12 seconds on that December morning in 1903 to a man walking on the moon 66 years later is just mind-blowing. Anyway, this brings us to the end of another episode of Random History. I hope you enjoyed it and will come back and listen to future episodes. If you'd like to view the transcript or sources for this episode, click on the link in the description. You can also make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link or shooting us an email. As always, I want to thank Argos Media for producing Random History and to thank my wife for her continued support and inspiration. So until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.